Anyways, welcome to this session then. I'm really happy to see Wojtek finally made it. You're muted, but you can unmute yourself.
Give me a second. Hello, hi. Yeah, sorry, it's kid picking up time from school and all the rest of it, so it's get dragged into all of that.
But speaking to in terms of actually people doing stuff regeneratively, if you follow Wojtek, he's got a really interesting grazing program going on, including deer. So that's something to look at.
Yeah. Well, we're all trying to do stuff, aren't we? So I had to do some mob grazing with a mixed mob of animals, sheep and cattle and horses. The deer don't form part of that, but the deer are on parkland in the middle of our farm, so we benefit from a sort of wildlife, I suppose a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, a sort of sanctuary for things like dung beetles and other things that then spread out into the pasture, which has been quite interesting since we stopped using chemicals on the animals, to see dung beetle populations going through the roof, fungal activity increasing, breakdown of trampled matter as well.
How long did it take for insect and dung beetle activity to kick in visually, that you could actually see it after you stopped using?
Well, the difficult thing about all of this is, you start noticing things when you open your eyes, don't you? If you could rewind and see how things were before, but you can't do that. By the time you start noticing something, you think, well, what's that there before? I do know that I treated some livestock. I treated a lamb. I had a really poorly lamb, and thought, this really probably shouldn't, should let nature take its course. But I intervened and thought, no, I'm going to help it out. So I gave it some drugs and things. Observed it in a small pen for a few days, and it just decimated every insect that came anywhere near it. There was just every day I came back, there were more large geotrupid dung beetles that had come out of the deer park, where we don't obviously treat any deer, so they're living around there, and landing on its poo and just dying. And I saw quite a lot of that. And so I just thought to myself, wow, if we've been treating these animals every 6 weeks, which is what we'd been doing previously, with some sort of wormer or a fly treatment, we must be affecting, think if that's just what one little lamb's done, which died anyway eventually, what's the cause of 300 ewes and 450 lambs doing? So we stopped that. It's very difficult to know what's changed, but definitely I think bat species are up. Definitely I think I'm noticing more. But am I noticing these things more because my eyes are open and they were closed before? Difficult to know. So yeah, the livestock operation is quite fun, and what we're doing at the moment is we've had some thinning on woodlands, so I'm trying to use the livestock to help me restore parkland environments. We're doing quite a bit of research into parkland habitats, and interesting, Daniel, that woodland where we found those predatory nematodes, that's been thinned, not drastically, but thinned enough so that I'll be able to take animals through there and start to see how that system changes.
That's interesting
to see how the soil life develops in there. So yeah, and then on the arable, I'm taking back arable land, which I'm regeneratively farming as well. So, I mean, it takes time, I think, to get to where you want to get to. We've got to wean the land off certain things, so we're definitely not sort of regen, but we are minimal tillage, direct drilling.
Have you managed to on the land that you've taken, actually, have you managed to put in cover crops before winter?
We did last year. This year we've winter crop, but last year we did spring crop. We did some cover crop, but we were late getting on.
Okay, so I thought that you basically had just taken some land back, this summer. So
yeah, no, we've winter cropped everything this year. I mean, it's a balance, isn't it, between particularly when you've not farmed land before, you've got to make some money. And it's there's some real moments where you've got to go, how far am I prepared to, I'm prepared to do all sorts of things on the livestock business enterprise, the grass, because I understand that so much more than I understand the arable at the moment. And it's far less of a risk anyway, financially. Whereas the arable side, I've got the right partner, we'll get there. But it's small steps. But for sure, it's better than what was happening to it before. So.
Yeah, I've just put on the chat your Twitter handle, so people can find you.
Is there any blog or website or anything?
I use Twitter quite a bit. LinkedIn, Twitter. I just post a lot of stuff on there. I'm in a mob grazing WhatsApp group, mob grazing UK WhatsApp group, which is quite a good group for mob grazing stuff. But I don't sort of keep a blog or anything at the moment.
No, just wanted because you get a better perception of space and size and what have you with that.
And in Wojtek, it was thanks to Wojtek that I actually saw my first predatory nematode. So this was Wojtek. I can't remember what it was, like April or something that you.
Yeah, it was springtime, wasn't it? Yeah.
And yeah, it was this massive thing, and I can't remember if I even published it anywhere, but we don't have it in the library. Still, it sits there as an example of what they could look like, because it was big guy. And I think, do you know what? I think we actually have put it here as well. We might have some descendants actually living in some of our older piles now. So that would be interesting to see. Yeah,
that would be good. I mean, the interesting thing about that was that then, I then went out into the field, took a soil sample, that had a look. Daniel got me on the microscope and found one in the field, which was an absolute monster. Do you remember? I haven't found any since, but it's just I don't know how I managed to find it. It was just huge, and I was in the field, but I haven't found any. I haven't been able to, nothing since. Like, to be fair, I haven't done as much looking, but yeah, it's.
Yeah, there's still the element of variability with all of this stuff, So there's still a lot of work to be done to be since that nematode, the one other sample I've seen it actually sent in was actually an arable field. And I sort of, before that, my assumption would have been that you wouldn't find it in an arable field. Now I'm just basically thinking that, okay, well, there is a possibility that they do live in arable fields because of the root feeding nematodes in them. Because the other type of nematodes that I do find in arable fields are just root feeders. I don't see anything else when people send samples in. So then, okay, there's food for them, so why not, right?
Well, I did so that one that I found, first of all, because I found two. I found one which was
I know you found one in pasture, I think you told me.
One in the pasture, and then I went and took a soil sample from a field that had been sort of conventionally farmed, and I found one, but it was dead. Right. Whether it had died, I don't know when it had died, but that surprised me. But like you say, it could, if the food source is there and if they, I don't know, dung beetles are quite interesting because they can cover quite far ground and move out. And I think, I'll say this at NEP as well, when I've been studying or listening to people from NEP, having we have this deer park in the middle of the farm, and it, because it's unmanaged in a way, wildlife, it's like a wildlife haven, and I think that then spreads out. Once you allow it to, it can spread out into the farm. I don't know how far soil life probably doesn't travel a huge distance, but if
I think it needs those taxi cabs.
Yeah,
we have considered running a study of the microbial population on birds' feet, but that will require cutting off quite a few birds' feet. So I'm not sure if my daughter would be ready for me to do that.
Yeah.
Or just put a little washing station,
Yeah. I suppose animals are also a way of, that's a good point.
So yeah,
you mentioned that you were identifying species and things. Where do you do you record those? Are you mapping species on
Not
your?
in any sophisticated way like I wish I could, purely down to time. But you know, at the moment, sorry.
Yeah, gonna just say, gonna throw in a suggestion. I've recently found iNaturalist because I've had the same frustration, and it's quite amazing. It's really easy, and it would be something if we were all doing something like it. You literally only have to take a photograph, or you can do a recording.
Yeah.
And you can map it to within 2 meters.
Okay. And what's that called?
It's called iNaturalist.
iNaturalist. Yeah, because I've got
and you
something
can
called
even
Seek that identifies plants and things.
well, this does all the beauty is it does all species.
Mhm.
And you can download it into a spreadsheet. So if you've got another organization or anybody wanting to use it for their own use, their own databases, it can be it can be downloaded and retabulated.
That's interesting.
But I was surprised at how easy, and you can do it from your phone. So if you take a photograph on your phone, you can share it from the gallery straight into the app, and you can either do it, you can make notes, you can say if it's cultivated or not, you can, and then if you don't, and it will give you suggestions on ID. And if you don't know, you can put something generic or even nothing. But if you put something generic, then the nerds that are out there who love these things come and tell you.
Yeah, that's good.
And so if you get somebody who, if you put something up and you identify it as whatever it is, if 2 other people who know what they're talking about verify what you say, correct or verify what you say, then it becomes part of the sort of database. And I'm just thinking that if we were all doing that in all our different places, wouldn't it be fascinating to see, compare how rich our places are?
Yeah, definitely. I think recording species and having these baselines is really critical, isn't it?
I've just shared where I've got to so far, which is mostly moths because I had a moth trap. I'm not working much because I've got fibro and other craps going on. So I'm not doing what I would like to be doing, but a lad who wants to learn about this sort of stuff might come and join me when he's got both work and accommodation sorted out. Unfortunately, I can't offer him either, but then it might start growing again. But you can see what it's like from that link.
Yeah,
and it's all free.
Yeah.
That's the challenge, right? Isn't it? It's like these apps, these resources are free. It's just the time that isn't.
That's right. But, just taking photographs is really easy.
Yeah.
Wojtek, you sent me samples, didn't you, today? Expecting you tomorrow, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Was that Compost? Was that your?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's 3 different.
Are you still doing those buckets in the cellar?
Yeah, so it's 2. So it's 1 from each of those.
Okay.
So one was made as a sort of mini Johnson Sue recipe, and that I haven't tinkered with, other than probably overwatered it to begin with, and then probably have underwatered it more recently. But we'll see. There's plenty of worm life in there.
Is that the same? Is that the same batch?
Yeah, it was one that had quite a lot of protozoa in it last time we looked at it.
Tessate amoebae, but there was lots of Tessate amoebae in that one. That was like what, 6 months ago, right, or something? Or 7 months ago now.
So we're interested to see how that's developed. Then the other one, I used some of that woodland compost where we found the predatory nematodes.
Oh yeah.
I used some of my vermicompost, and some of the Johnson Sue mix, and mixed it all up together, and kept it moist, probably a bit too much, but plenty of life and all sorts of things going on. And then had this nematode population boom that I told you about. And then haven't really looked at many samples of it, to be fair, since, but certainly haven't seen any nematodes in it, whereas I normally find a few per sample. And that one boom, where they were everywhere. So whether the food source, the cycle, whatever they were on, whatever they were eating, I couldn't identify what type they were. I didn't get to that level. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that's performing. And then the other one is a worm compost where I've had I've put air tubes in it, in an old freezer with air tubes to try and get some fungal, better fungal activity maybe in there. And also I've had clover living on the top. So I've had a living root as well. So it's worm compost that had been processed by the worms already pretty much, and then planted some seeds on it must have been early summer, and put the air tubes in. So it's been a few months now like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that compares. It's very soil looking. I don't know what life will be.
The one thing that we haven't tried yet is getting some mycorrhizal inoculant, and then putting maybe some wheat plants into deep compost, maturing compost basically, and just growing it in there, seeing if we can actually have some mycorrhizal propagules inside the compost as we produce it. So that's one thing we haven't tried yet. So if you've got this clover, maybe consider at some point to see if you can get some AMF fungi, put it in there, grow it alongside, see if you get some propagation of that, because then you have added AMF in your mix.
Yeah. Well, the idea of putting the plant in, I know these things are very specific depending on the microbiome of the plant and what the plant wants and everything else, but the idea of having the living root was to try and attract different microbes, try and alter the microbial balance and all that sort of stuff. But so we'll see. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes back.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You just reminded me I need to do a report for a sample from yesterday, so I just forgot. I've been busy with other stuff, obviously. But that's very good. Hello, Rob. Hello, Andrew. And Andrew Wilson is on the blower, basically just doing business, listening in. That's very good. Everybody's busy. I had some exchanges with Sheffield University to get costings of everything, and obviously we're still going for the grant for the trials. What I want to basically propose to everybody in the group is that we have a choice. There's going to be depending on if we get the grant money or not. So we need the grant money basically lowers the cost to the farmer. So if we don't get the grant, there is a choice to do commercial trials with the same setup as the universities would suggest, having 3 replicates of 3 treatments. But we would just need to basically design it to a size that makes sense for you. So I'll be speaking with everyone individually. I believe I think we need to set up some individual conversations to see what makes sense for all of you, and that way we'll be able to make sure that we're doing some trials regardless of the grant. And yeah, so that's I'll reach out to each one of you individually so we can set up some time to chat, because obviously this is a good place for a discussion, but to work out these details, I think we need to do it face to face. How's that sound?
Fine. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. Good. Any questions? Any technical questions on compost making? You've got the guys sitting on the microscope all afternoon today, just basically getting bored. Their eyes getting, just flowing out now of their sockets, I think.
I mixed some wood chip in with some pig muck, partly because we took some trees down some of the chip, and there was a bit more left than what would fit on the truck. What am I going to do with this? Well, let's use it as an opportunity to try and make a bit of compost and see what we make of it. And it was fairly crudely mixed together. And I thought, well, how often should I be turning this? Should I be monitoring temperature and things? From a pharmatastic basic sort of a level, what's your must do's and must not do's?
How much muck did you mix with that wood chip? Percentage wise?
It'll be about 70% muck, 30% wood chip.
How much again?
About 70% muck, 30% wood chip.
Did you say, so it was pig muck, but was that
Yeah.
pure pig muck, or was it a sort of mixed already with some other straw or something?
Well, farmyard muck, so strawy sort of stuff.
Okay, so in essence, it will be sort of 30% actual pig poo, and the rest would be woody.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Sort of rough estimate. And did you see any steam coming off of it?
Yeah, there was a bit of steam when I disturbed the heat. We've been sat in the heat for probably 3 weeks before I put mix the wood chip with it.
Okay. Have you looked inside at all?
Not yet.
Are you scared?
No, I just haven't got around to it, to be quite honest.
It's
only a fairly small amount. There was only sort of 2.5 cube of wood chip to mix with it, so it's not a big amount. I thought, let's just have a play and do a bit of learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you open it up, you might find at the moment it still probably would have some of the actinobacteria stage in it. So it might be interesting to look at it and smell it, which is basically what you get. Because obviously pig muck, that when you start with it, it's going to be smelly. So the question is sort of, how far down the line in the composting process you are, and if actually the center actually had enough oxygen, if you weren't turning it. Obviously, when you mixed it, if you mixed it with the wood chip, then it had an opportunity to be aerated.
Yeah, it's mixed relatively crudely as you are with a telehandler bucket. It wouldn't do the job that a compost turner would.
Well, no, obviously, but it's something, at least you lift it up, and actually it gets the oxygen inside in one way or the other. Obviously, you don't break down bigger clumps, but the what I want to say, there's actually something Adam suggested some while back, that what we could try and do some trials with people keeping pigs and people keeping chickens actually, and spraying microbes onto the litter, and actually helping with breaking down the nutrients when it's still there, basically, and with the potential to also reduce the amount of pathogens in it as the animals are doing their business. Is that material basically? Is that basically one of your neighbor farmers or somebody close that you know?
No, it all came from here.
Say again?
The chip on the muck all came from here.
From here, okay. So this is your farm.
Stuff, yeah, it's all our own stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a potential basically to actually start the breakdown process. When the animals are actually there. Yeah. Something to test.
Yeah, you sent me an email actually about putting things in the pigs.
Oh yeah, my brain is like a sieve. There you go. We've already talked about it. Which
I had a quick read of it at the time. I've had 2.5 weeks out on the tractor because I've had a member of staff move on, which does present its challenges. So I haven't got any further with it, but that did sound like practical.
You say you're busy, like a farmer or somebody.
It was spectacular the last couple of weeks, to be quite honest. It's a bit zombified, but when we've got past that peak now, fortunately, I wonder if I can find the email I need. Mm-hmm. That was an interesting thing. It did strike me as a very practical solution, and I like practical solutions. They're a bit more doable.
I've heard of people using lactobacillus, applying that to bedding. That's something I was going to do last year in the lambing shed. I'm doing outdoor lambing this year, so and much later in the season, so I probably won't need to do it. But
the one thing about lactobacillus, from what I understand, they may be denitrifying.
Is what? Sorry.
Denitrifying. Somebody needs to correct me on that. But they might be actually, you might be losing nitrogen when you do that. So you lose the smell because they basically turn it into NO2, and then basically that has no smell.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little more about? Is it only indoor units you're talking about for poultry, or outdoor as well? Sort of on litter.
I mean, any litter. Yeah. I mean, the idea is basically to help with any pathogen buildup potentially.
Yeah,
because there's going to be a race. There's going to be a race to nutrients.
Yeah, because we're all going into lockdown just recently, shortly with the bird flu going. So I've just moved. I only got a few birds now. There's only what 30 odd, instead of the couple of thousand I used to have. And they're just moving them into the bottom of my old plant nursery so that they can start working in there while they're allowed out. But I've just laid chip down below where they're going to be, and they're going to have access to making a sort of compost, weeding compost heap beside them. So to start that, one of these sort of walkthrough chicken composters, to see how that works as an experiment, because that whole area down there will hopefully eventually grow food in the future. But it's a confined area that will have chip litter around the housing.
One thing about wood chips and chickens, did you say it's used as litter? Have you used it as litter before for chickens?
In places, yeah.
There is just one thing. There is just one thing in my mind. It may be an isolated incident, but I thought I'd mention it. You may have other experiences already, but a friend of mine near here, actually, he keeps turkeys seasonally, and once he used wood chip, and they started stuffing themselves, and 80% of them died because they just stuffed themselves with wood chips.
Yes, mine are free range birds. They're sort of used to being out and about and having stuff.
This is isolated. These were young,
I can understand.
Young turkeys.
Turkeys are remarkably dim.
Turkeys
are remarkably dim.
Well, these were young ones as well, so he lost literally 2 weeks after he got them, from a breeder.
Oh no, that's not good. No.
In terms of intelligence, turkeys are like sheep with feathers.
There you go.
Oh yeah, and then some.
But at least wool might still have some value, I hear. Feathers, not necessarily.
You'd hope so. I mean, fortunately, I don't keep sheep or turkeys, but to share similar opinions of them.
We've been talking actually here in the office, in the lab, actually, about using wool for compost, because these days wool is actually so valued so low. Actually, I mean, Judith and Wojtek, you could probably comment on that.
Not brilliant. We do. I think we're getting a check this year, but it's not big, for 900 cheap, something like that.
Will it cover the cost of shearing?
Nah.
I didn't think it would.
Nah.
I've used I used wool in the garden last year on vegetable as a mulch, with mixed results. Fantastic results for what were they, onions, which we put in early, onion sets which we put in early. It was, in comparison to a row the other side of the garden, required no watering, no weeding, and we've still got the wool mulch down. I mean, it takes time to decompose, and I'm not that bothered about that. I'll just pull it back. I mean, it looks a bit of a mess, but if you look underneath, there's loads of worm activity, there's loads of moisture. I think it helps to keep the soil temperature a bit warmer as well. I did some tests on that last year. I think it has some good applications as a mulch, depending on what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do. But yeah, and then as compost, I actually use it now. So my vermicompost is mostly house food waste, just scraps. So it can be quite putrefying, but I mix that with, I always put a bucket on top of last time's compost. So I don't really put much brown material in anymore. I just put that in and put the old compost on, getting the microbes from there. And then if I have fly trouble, if I put a layer of wool on top, then it gets rid of the flies. I don't know why, but they seem to. The only thing you've got to be careful is you don't cover the whole pile in wool, because then you'll fry your worms. They're all trying to escape because it gets too hot. So so it's quite good. It sort of accelerates that, you know, if you're looking to get that compost, that hot compost effect, it can help with that. But yeah, I literally just put it over the section where I put the fresh food. It keeps the flies down.
Yeah, the guys actually have been putting some wool on some of our piles as well. Adam, can you hear us right now? Because you're muted. I can't see you.
One thing I would say about wool as a myth buster is it's supposed to keep slugs away. It doesn't. I've got slugs crawling all over ours. I thought it'd be a really good slug deterrent, but
it's not.
That didn't work.
The guys are hiding in there because basically they've been.
Oh, sorry, I missed what was said. I heard my name, but I missed everything. So I was
was asking basically, did you have any observations from using the wool on the compost piles? Because Wojtek mentioned that he's used some wool to cover his compost pile as well.
Yeah, I mean, nothing major really. Just I basically order regenerative meat boxes, and it comes with that. Instead of sending it back, I use it to mulch the top of the pile. I put a big kind of layer of King Stropharia in my pile, so then I put the wool on top of that. But I'm not sure. It's hard to say. It's hard to say what's actually come from using wool, but it strikes me as breathable, but protecting the pile a little bit from the elements. So, seemed like a good idea.
I think also if you use it outside, or I've used it on vegetable beds outside, is it holds moisture really well and slowly releases it. So so you know you get much more regulation of water, I think.
Yeah, Dalefoot's compost from the Lake District, that I always used to use that, and it was decent. It's not got mad amounts of microbes in it, but the structure is nice from the wool, I guess, and the bracken.
Definitely. Yeah, they've got good reputation because obviously they control their inputs as well, which is important for a commercial compost. I wonder if Michael, basically, are you in the car right now again, or can you hear us okay? Michael Barton. Oh, I don't think he can hear us right now. Oh, something's happening.
One thing that's worth saying that I heard it come up earlier about animal bedding. It's worth looking into Han Qiu-Chou's work with the Chinese military on raising microbial levels in animal bedding, particularly pigs and chickens. So yeah, do the thing Daniel was saying. Try and treat the manure as it lands, or at least start a process of pulling the ammonia out of the manure, and basically they just have deep litter systems that are kind of like a big hugel culture. Obviously, like buildings in the UK aren't made to really take that big deep litter systems, but maybe it could be adapted somehow. It's well worth looking into. It's really interesting. The Chinese military were raising loads of pigs. It was causing a big stink, and the local towns and villages were complaining about the big stink that moved in. And then they called Master Cho, who's a Korean natural farmer. He came in and deodorized the whole situation. And yeah, natural farming became famous for its no-smell pigs and chickens.
Now, when you say the deep litter system is sort of reminiscent of hugel culture, were they actually stacking some branches at the bottom and then
branches, logs, there are loads of carbon that will help absorb any amount of moisture that's ever going to be created by the amount of pigs you're going to have in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a substantial amount of carbon that goes into some of these systems. Obviously the chickens less so, but still requires a lot of material. It's really interesting. They've got adaptations for Hawaii as well, where they have to do it on concrete. whereas in Korea they try and do it in contact with the ground. But obviously legislation doesn't permit that in some places, so you have to adapt the buildings and the systems to the legislation of the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because even here, you know, next to our building, there's the cattle shed, and it's going to be probably very similar on most farms, where they just simply top it off with straw, and then sort of like towards the you know, in the spring when the cattle is let out onto to the pasture, then you've got, you know, a layer of maybe, you know, 60-80 centimeters of muck. So it's not the same, I guess, because having branches, having everything, that's interesting.
Yeah, even just treating the straw and the manure with the microbes, you know, it's only gonna, if it's the right microgroups, it's only going to help the situation, deodorize the place, and keep the animals healthy. You know, if they're being overwintered as well, like cows and stuff, might be useful.
Yeah, that's it. You know, for animal health, you know, then probably actually, you know, some of that denitrifying, you know, probably works as well, because, you know, you have to, you then outcompete all of the guys that will be feeding on the excess nitrogen. So.
If you're doing that in cat, what microbes are you using to apply? What is it? Is it like JMS?
JMS, I've never heard it. They basically use the end of the process of IMO, so it's called IMO 5, or liquid IMO would be the next one. So what that is they take inoculum from the woods, and then they grow it out on carbon and carbohydrate material, and that's IMO 3, and then they mix that one-to-one with the agricultural soil or some good soil, and they include stuff like termite soil or ant soil, because it's got certain characteristics that they want. And they also, they'll keep kind of keep this kind of semi-heated up or applying moisture to it to achieve kind of field capacity, and they'll ferment it all together. Not ferment, but they'll zhuzh it up for a while and then they'll mix in some compost, and then that's used to top dress the animal beddings. There's actually some good there's some good examples by Chris Trump on YouTube. He talks you through the chicken and piggery style KNF, I think. And if you want to go deeper, there's Drake KNF. If you go into his YouTube archives, he has some really long videos, direct translations from Hankyu Cho. So you can find this stuff out there. Right. Just have to look. But I would suggest probably with the accountability of the microscope, maybe our microbes could be even better. Obviously, we need loads more information to say that. But just judging from making IMO myself and making compost and now doing what we're doing, the groups are definitely more in the aerobic, definitely nice looking groups. No, less chance for pathogens anyway in the processes in the end result. But still, the natural farming system works. So you can't really argue with stuff that works, because it works. They don't necessarily tell you how it works very well, which is what people need to know, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be
you were talking about JMS, Judith, and that's basically, you know, we don't really know what's going on with JMS, because it's just you take forest microbes, you take potato starch, and you take minerals from salt, right? And then you mix all those things together and you leave it to stand, and depending on where the water comes from and, you know, where you are, and, you know, there's a lot that could be different about that process, and we don't really know anything about it.
Have we tried actually making it here in the lab?
No, we haven't.
Do you know when you just described it, I was just my thoughts went to flagellates.
Yeah, I mean, it might work. The things that there is some microscopy on the Young Sang Cho, some of the talks on the Jadam YouTube channel, but there's not much there, and they look very much like the kind of flagellates we've seen in anaerobic settings. None of the pictures look like beneficial soil microbes as taught by Dr. Elaine Ingham. I'm not saying they don't work for things, they might act as a fertilizer, they might get killed on contact with the aerobic environment, but I don't think it's the optimal microbial solution.
It's the interesting thing for me basically is there is one thing that we've noticed is that in anaerobic conditions we actually have seen flagellate growth, and then they can potentially survive aerobic conditions as well. Well, we also know that if they dry out too quickly, they will burst, and so nutrients will fall out of their guts and will be available. So there's things to be there's work to be done, for us to be able to actually answer those questions. But we've seen populations of flagellates actually being quite high in anaerobic preparations before, or not even preparations, just basically anaerobic conditions. So this is something that, but then then there's the thing about actually how are they going to survive in new conditions, and then we've done experiments where we try to dry out flagellates. We had an aerobic thing, and we tried to dry out the flagellates overnight, and they just basically popped. They didn't encyst. They didn't actually create any survival, structures that allow them to survive. So yeah, it's still lots of work in that regard, but it's an interesting thing. If they're growing out anaerobic microbes with these resources, the one thing that always comes to my mind is just basically that these microbes are very good at turning these resources into substances which are very plant available, and I think this is the benefit with all of these preparations. And so they basically make it balanced. That's how I see it. I don't have anything to back this statement, but that's basically my my whole understanding of this would be that they basically make it balanced.
And would that then be like a short-term thing and need to be replenished all the time, rather than if you're establishing your soil food web as you want to establish it, that's more a long-term, it wouldn't.
I think you're dead on. Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
Hmm?
I think that's exactly it. Right. And what the stuff we're establishing, once it's established, is going to kind of replicate and expand from the area of application. But the JMS, I don't know, that could just be dying on impact, or maybe a small percentage of the stuff that you can cook up in those kind of situations will survive, but who knows?
It's like an organic amendment, basically. It's an organic feed basically that you reapply, kind of thing. It's not a bad thing, obviously, for a transition period. It's something that needs to be looked into, I think.
And to make it clear as well, the Jadam microbial solution, it's not a long ferment. So the inoculant comes from a forest and it goes into water, but only for about, I don't know, it depends on the temperature and the humidity and the conditions it's in. But sometimes it's just a few days, isn't it, Judith?
Yeah, I heated mine because it was too cold up here.
Yeah, exactly.
2.5 days, something like that.
2.5 days, right? And then you see a ring form if it goes well, and then that ring expands, and just before that ring of bubbles hits the edge of the container, Young Sang says to use it then. So yeah, we haven't done it here and we haven't looked at it yet, but it would be interesting to look at because it is a time sensitive thing. So maybe there's some science to it that we don't know about.
And the thing for me was that the amount of the dilution you're supposed to put it on. So I just put it on in rain. Then I didn't need to dilute it as much. And it never killed the grass. The grass was fine. But yeah, I think you do need to dilute it. But it's amazing how a bit of rain creates a huge dilution.
Yeah, for sure.
Spraying.
No, that's very helpful, because especially if it does have flagellates, then we've applied flagellates onto scorched earth, and they don't really have a chance. But if you're doing it in rain, I'd say that you drastically increase their probability of actual survival and actually staying in the system as well. If there are flagellates in that system, obviously, that's the thing.
Yeah, well, I've got no way of telling what's there. I just put it on and see.
Well, you've got a high probability of having flagellates. If we're just thinking of flagellates, you have a high probability of having flagellates in your compost, because we already know that you've had compost with everything, but we've also got this list which basically tells us that the majority of people have flagellates in compost. So most compost, homemade compost, I'm not talking about store, the green waste compost, but most homemade compost, the Johnson Sewer bioreactors that we've seen, they have flagellates. So if applying direct extracts from compost onto soil in rain is what you can do, it's basically something that I would be definitely behind.
Yeah, I used the compost, but I also used soil from a wood that runs down through the middle of the farm, where I was using soil from under the leaf litter there. And I tended to mix them both together, so I had a bit of both.
Yeah, you could pick up some flagellates from that, definitely, and they would probably grow out into the solution. But stuff like fungi, that's not really going to grow out in a solution.
Yeah, exactly. It can't possibly.
It will be there from the little handful or whatever you put in. So that's going to help.
It's not going to multiply in the 2.5 days when it's in 40 gallons of water or something. That's
it, yeah. But flagellates, you could multiply them and put them out. And different types of forest bacteria, maybe. Who knows? Really would like to know.
I'll need to learn to work a microscope, won't I?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we could start. Maybe we'll try set some up. Maybe in spring we can, when it's a bit warmer, we can try something.
Yeah.
Or even with a heater, like you said.
What sort of heater did you use?
Aquarium heater.
Aquarium heater. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it was kept it to the right temperature, but it certainly was warmer than it would have been. And I found a kind of equilibrium that worked. And I just heated it up, and then actually after the first 12 hours, I kind of switched it off unless it was particularly cold, and let it cool down a bit. So yeah, and it worked fine, because if it was cold, I had no control of how long it was going to take, and yeah, it just wasn't. It was getting difficult to work out when it was going to work.
Good idea. Something I might try for my azotobacter experiment, because they require a constant 30-degree incubation temperature.
Yeah, I'm sure you could set something up quite easily, and they're not dear. I got a second-hand one, so. No,
and I'm not using a huge amount of volume either. I'm going to be doing it in a 30-liter bucket, and I'll probably just have it half full. So I just need to find some time to do it. I've got almost everything. Doug, any questions?
No, I'm just listening intently, trying to learn.
Good.
And I think I've learned something. Although I have to be honest, I definitely learn something every week, but I also get a little bit more confused each time as well.
Ah, you're welcome.
So I'm slowly realizing that this is a very complicated topic, and but it's fascinating stuff. So I find myself listening and Googling the whole time. Learning on the job. Yeah. So no, I'm just thoroughly enjoying listening. Yeah.
So
where do people go to learn stuff? What are people's resources for reading or online, YouTube or whatever? Because I think that's something that we could share.
Anybody? because I can tell I've been trawling through scientific papers lately.
Yeah, we've amassed like lots of resources, right? So we could put a file together for everyone.
Yeah, I could probably get something up as well. There's lots of stuff actually. We've got a growing library now, of papers and books. So hopefully we'll be able to share some of that soon.
Just got one thing. Have you done much work with biochar at all yet? Have you?
Not yet. I've actually found a paper, I still haven't read it yet, on micronized biochar. And I've also looked at what is the actual temperature of breakdown of lignin. Because, in the biochar process, kind of, you break down lignin because it's similar temperatures. And the reason I looked at it is because lignin is like the primary substance for the primary decomposers. And then I was thinking perhaps there's a way to speed up the process of getting down to secondary and tertiary decomposers if we have that stuff already half broken down. But I don't know if it's going to be a shortcut that basically doesn't really give a shortcut, because, for instance, okay, we break down the lignin due to temperature, but we volatilize other things that these things would still require. And maybe there are other metabolites that require both the lignin and some other stuff put together, and then those byproducts are only the foods for the fungi that we need. So yeah, so there's biochar. I think I've come across some other paper that looked interesting, but there's this is an open subject. People obviously hail biochar these days because it's been recognized as a climate change solution. I just want to look at it from the perspective of, can we connect it with our biology effectively, and, have a good working proof on that. So it's definitely something to look into.
Yeah.
Stephen, any questions?
No questions at this stage. Listening intently.
Yeah, you're not too far from Judith, actually.
Well, where are you, Stephen?
Just north of Dundee in Angus.
Oh, it's a bit away.
Where are you?
Moffat, halfway between Carlisle and
yeah.
Glasgow. Yeah,
Well, I
right
passed
beside the
Moffat.
motorway.
I'll pass Moffat if I'm driving south down the west.
Yeah, aye.
So there's at least 3 people in Scotland on this call.
Yes.
Stephen, Judith, and Michael.
Where Ard Chatton is.
I don't know where Jill is.
I think she's on the west coast.
Well, if Ard Chatton is the place where she is, then that's in the far west. Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
With Google.
My understanding of the English geography is limited. I'm sorry.
Well, of course, it's not English. It's Scottish.
Well, there you go. Now you see.
So I think of more resources for you, Judith. Journey to the Microcosmos is always fun. If you've never seen it, it's on YouTube. They do really high quality images, of microbes. They talk you through the life cycle of the microbe or something like that.
But that one is too fun to watch. It's not necessarily practical stuff to grow out your plants.
No, but it is interesting when you're getting into the microbe world.
Journey to the Microcosmos, right?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Pen with me.
But then you were saying some other resources in terms of KNF, if you wanted to have a look at that. That was Chris Trump you mentioned, and somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Trump teaches. There's Sara India. They teach CGNF. They've got the whole system on the website there. Maybe I could just pop it in the chat.
And then any questions regarding actual hot composting or static composting, you can always you can ask them here every week. We're here to answer those questions, so you can always ask away. And there's somebody who's just joined you as well.
That's my husband, Tom.
Hello, Tom. Pleasure meeting you.
Didn't know you could see me.
He's wanting to see.
No. I was just curious.
This is the meeting about Judith's witchcraft.
Oh yeah.
As you can see, there are more people who subscribe to these things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We do need to learn to make better use and better compost, because we just pile it up and then use it at some point. So I do need to learn more about that.
Yeah. We're trying to, obviously we're trying hard to make a shortcut to of it. And speaking of which, before we go, I need to put a plug in. By the end of the month, we'll have the goop on the website, you know, to purchase. So we're working hard to make it an actual product people can buy. So I have to put the plug in because we're very, very proud of it.
It's a brilliant name.
I know. We're hoping that Gwyneth Paltrow will notice us and sue us, so we can have lots of intimacy. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what, you can send that out. Does it need to be held at a certain temperature?
It can stay in the fridge for a week. We don't recommend going more than a week before use.
Right. Okay.
The fungi will probably be fine for a lot longer than a week from what we've seen, but the
nematodes won't.
The grazers won't. They seem to go first. And that link is now in the chat, cgnfindia.com.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. In terms of the goop, we've it's quite happy. I mean, the first goop actually that Tom did, I think Tom was looking at it every day for like 2 weeks and still didn't see much change in fungi. So we know that we're happy for it to stay for a week in the fridge. But because we had this mention in Sunday Telegraph by Bunny Guinness, she suggested that it's going to be a good stocking filler for Christmas. And I said, perhaps it's not the best stocking if it's going to be on the fireplace. But then I was speaking to another colleague, and she suggested that we make vouchers, and maybe there's a way to, you know, for people to give a gift to their, you know, gardener friends, you know, by giving them this call-off vouchers, like call this off whenever you're ready to use it, and we just ship it straight away to them. So that's one way to have a Christmas gift for your favorite gardener, basically, kind of thing. So yeah, that's
to grow it. And is it, you know, is it a complicated, you know, are you going to be able to, is it repeatable for you? Can you have a supply on an ongoing basis, or is it something that a batch can go wrong and you're stuck for 3 weeks or something?
That's a great question, actually. You know, it's something that when I was talking to the guys yesterday, and Tom was so antsy because it's like, oh, how do you mean you want to sell so much of this group, but then we need more for trials and everything? It's like, well, let's work out the replacement, you know, quantity that we need to replace, basically. Well, let's work out what is the minimum amount that we need to sell to make sure that the business keeps going, and just work on that. So yeah, we've got a process that we think takes about 2 months, maybe 3 months to get like this minimum amount of fungi that we want in the group. And then the bacterial feeding nematodes take less. And so the two main elements in the group, thanks Doug, see you later. The two main elements in the group are fungi and nematodes in high quantities, because these are the elements that we see missing in other people's compost. So most people's compost will have bacteria and protozoa, but they lack the fungi and lack the nematodes. So when we sell this, we want to basically first solve the first problem, that people don't have the fungi and the nematodes, and then we'll try to solve the problem of adding protozoa in an assisted form so they can survive, you know, anything that you do with them. And then we'll have a complete product because bacteria will be there. Unless I get also the azotobacter sorted, and we're going to have, you know, nitrogen fixers in the mix as well. So hopefully, you know, I've got a book now, you know, how to insist nitrogen fixing.
I'll leave you to read that.
Yes, thank you. You know, this is my bedtime reading. But yeah, so there's this is an ongoing development. So right. Any more questions before we finish? No, all good. Well then, thanks everybody for dialing in. Again, I'll reach out to you individually to talk about trials. And Jill, if I identify your email, I'll send you something in terms of sound bites to share with other farmers. So thank you very much for that. And I hope to see you next week.
Right, fine. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye all.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.